Hello. So we're gonna have a look at a game you sent. Uh, One thing, a disclaimer I would like to say is that in the future, keep in mind that we can probably learn more from your losses more than your wins. For example, in this game, I would say it looked quite easy, at least from the white perspective. White played quite decently, and black didn't. He eventually had a piece down, and white more or less uh, completed the game in fine fashion. But let's see in more detail. So, firstly, you already didn't say anything about this position, but this is already a mistake by black. Black basically has to either defend the pawn on move 2 to recapture with a pawn, or he can play the king's queen's gambit accepted if he wants. But this is not really a move. White can now complete his plan with c4, which is to get two pawns against one in the center. And here black can recapture with whatever, but eventually white can just take the center. If the queen takes, he gets a free tempo. So this is already considered good for white. For example, like this. Then the development is quite easy, something like this, not strictly necessary, but clearly white has an advantage. So this you have to know. Well, if you play d4, you have to know these things. So knight c3 instead, e6, and now we got some normal position. Bishop g5, which is, I guess, okay, but I think it gives up a pawn. Well, not really gives up a pawn, but this is not probably the most ideal way to play. For beginners, I would suggest playing more fixed structures, like the Carlsbad structure, by taking here. Black usually takes with the e-pawn, and now we get this very classical structure. White's plans include the minority attack after the black pawn goes to c6, and also expanding in the center with f3 and e4, eventually. Not right now, of course. So there's a lot of material about the structure on YouTube, on a lot of books, and this is what I would suggest. But okay, this is fine. Yeah, e4 is possible, but I think now black has the right to defend the pawn somehow. For example, like this. And we couldn't take because this was hanging. And this is not entirely clear. This is of course playable for both sides. White has the center. Keep in mind he doesn't win a piece because of this. And the position is quite chaotic. I wouldn't really suggest this. Well, e3. Now white took here. And there was no comment here, which is quite strange, because in general we don't want to give away bishops for knights unless there is a good reason to do this. The typical answer is just bishop h4. Black shouldn't really weaken his position with g5 yet, unless there's like a quick attack on the c3 square, but here there isn't. And some general play would look like this, I guess. Take, take, some IQP position. And this is perfectly playable for both sides. But here I think black can only be better here, after getting the bishop pair for free. Well, bishop takes c4 now. Bishop d6, black develops. And yeah, queen f3 is a strange move. Yeah, and it's good that you have some comments here. You said that you should have developed your knight to c3. I assume you meant f3, which is of course true. There's nothing special to do here. And you say your idea was that if he captures your queen, you can develop your knight while recapturing. No, but what you failed to say here is why would this be better than just developing a knight, right? And also he is not forced to capture. So what exactly is the idea if he, for example, defends? Now you've taken away the square from the knight, which really doesn't make sense. So for the future, you cannot base your plans off of if he does this, I will do this. For your first question should be what happens if he doesn't take, which he's not obliged. Right? Now your queen doesn't make sense. Okay, we can skip forward. Both sides develop their pieces one way or another. Not really sure where the knight is going. I think it makes sense to start expanding. But okay, this doesn't matter too much. Now black started playing quite poorly. Knight h7 doesn't really make sense to go here. Black should in general try to attack the center. Of course, this is now threatened, so logically this makes sense. But of course, white shouldn't be doing too badly. Well, here white got some space, and knight goes to e4, and eventually it provoked f5, which weakened black's position. Some exchanges happened, queen goes to e4, and now we could say white is a bit better, since this is a lot easier to attack than this. White is already developed, while black is having some issues, and the dark squared bishop doesn't look too menacing yet. So white can claim some advantage here. Bishop d3 is a nice move to provoke g6. Some more weakened squares. Rook a1 is nice, developing the last piece. And now white went for this bishop. Yeah, I'm not really sure about this move, as this doesn't really look like a big threat, as it kind of helps black. It's hard to say what white should play. Probably it's easiest to try and involve this rook, for example, like this. And yeah, here you said you're threatening to take the pawn on c7 once the bishop moves somewhere else. Again, we see the same problem as with queen f3. You cannot make plans based on your opponent. Your first question should be what happens if he does nothing. So after knight b5, what happens if he skips a move? It's unclear what this knight is doing. Why should the bishop move? It's defended, right? So, but he does move for some reason, and the knight goes back. So, and this doesn't really make sense to me. Brought the knight back, hoping to reroute it to e2 and f4. Well, the f4 square will be kind of defended, right? So probably here you should have just stopped and found a decent plan. Here probably just g3, right? It's in general a useful move for white to put pawns on dark squares, since he has the light square bishop, and it's good to control this bishop. But this doesn't matter too much. Rook b8. Yeah, white played d5, e5. Some moves happened. Yeah, bishop f5, of course, we have to move. And in general, this bishop is just a bit stuck. So I think white is already kind of winning, because after e4 here, he's an exchange down, or at least, or a piece, as in the game. If he goes here, then I guess this is simple enough, trapping the bishop. So black's mistake was probably earlier. Probably e5 was a mistake, just trapping his own bishop. Though here, there's still this move, right? And it's the only move. He thought he could make a counterattack, but now the d2 square is defended. So this wasn't very good by black. And yeah, here he decides to save the exchange, which of course probably isn't the right choice. He should probably give up the exchange instead of the piece. Though here as well white is completely winning, as there are more problems than material. Well, in the game white came out a piece ahead, so this is what I'm saying. We can't really learn much from this game, at least we can't really learn much about what we don't know about chess, right? We already know having a piece up is good, but in the realization phase of this game, it wasn't too easy. Let's take a look. So b4. Yeah, here you said you blundered a pawn, and you should have moved your queen to b3. Well, yes, the d5 pawn is attacked. And of course, it doesn't really change the evaluation of the position, as black's problems are with the king and his material deficit. But of course, having a pawn is fine. And you say queen b3 should have been played, but I don't really agree, as it looks very passive. You should first kind of forget this pawn. I think it's not that strictly necessary to your position. I think what's important is to safeguard the king and probably attack the weaknesses. Here, or maybe think about something like this. Or for example, king h1. It guards the king, also prepares rook g1. The b2 pawn doesn't really matter here. As long as the queens are on the board, white should try to realize his advantage by attacking. Okay. Queen f3, kind of strange move, but okay, doesn't really change much. And white started just moving back and forth. So here, just because we have a knight advantage doesn't mean we have to stop playing chess, right? White should find a decent plan for the rest of the game. And of course, when we have material advantages, we should probably exchange queens, right? So for example, queen c3 kind of forces the exchange of queens. He can give this check. We cannot take because the queen will hang, but we can just move it. So this doesn't really do anything. He can kind of stop the queen exchange like this, but this also doesn't help after f4. So the queens will be exchanged, and it will be a lot easier to win. Unless we keep the queens on to attack the king. But for now, it doesn't seem like we're getting much initiative. So the queen moved around. Yeah, rook c1. And now eventually queen c3 happened. And black accepted the queen exchange. Now it should be easier. The king went up. And yeah, here, of course, black shouldn't exchange rooks. He is kind of helping us in our cause to exchange everything. He should try playing like this. Of course, this is kind of hopeless for black in a serious game. His only chances are like trying to win the knight or something, but white can avoid that quite easily. And also he can try to push his passed pawn, but that's also not really viable. And the last strategy for black would be to somehow exchange all the pawns and get some endgame with maybe rook against rook and knight, which would be a draw, but that's also quite far away. So in the game he exchanged rooks, which helps white. a4, like, what's this move about? I'm not really sure. White shouldn't really waste too much time. He should probably try to get this pawn. If he tries to go here, this is of course winning. It requires, I guess, like 2 moves of calculation. So now that I see there's this as well. But this is not strictly necessary. There are many ways to win. Probably rook c4 is easiest. Next we go here, and then we go here. But a4, like, we shouldn't waste time like this. Every move counts. And just because we have a knight advantage doesn't mean we have to make random moves. Right? So now his king arrived, but now white finally found this tactic. And again, this should be a very, very easy win. But knight b2 doesn't really make sense to me in any sense. Well, why would the knight go to b2? This just seems like a terrible square. Of course, there's no point in really analyzing this. Like, black's only chance is to get this pawn and get some counterplay with this. But surely, in the meantime, white can take one of the pawns and make a passed pawn, which kind of happened. The king came, so the knight's journey wasn't really useful. Okay, the black pawn is still far away, so white has time to take some pawns, and then bring the knight or the king back to stop this, and it should be an easy win. Instead, white went for some kind of check. I don't really see a problem with just going to take some pawns. For example, if he just goes like this, I think white is definitely in time to stop this pawn, or even he can probably push. But the best solution to not calculate, let's say, would be to probably bring the knight here or here. So for example, like this, I guess, with the king here, or the king here. And let's take a look if this works. Here, 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 here. Right. And after this, we can sacrifice the knight. And if he does something else, then the knight will just go here or here. And he will never make progress, and we already have a passed pawn. So this probably would be the simplest realization. Of course, it's good to calculate a little bit. But okay, this also kind of works. But again, h3, I'm not really sure what's this move about. Why are we wasting time again? We can either go and take these pawns, or at least make some progress with our passed pawn in case it becomes a race. For example, after f4, now whenever we take this pawn, we will be a lot closer to queen. So again, another completely useless move. Doesn't really make much sense. Again, when we have such a winning advantage, we should strive to win in as clear a way possible. Well, h3, g5, king d4. Again, I'm not sure what exactly white is trying to do here. h5, knight d3. Of course, any move technically wins, but white is slowly going towards the wrong side. Okay, g4 and h4, this is probably black's only chance. Now he technically has 2 passed pawns, which is very annoying for a knight. But in this instance, white can easily stop it, one pawn with the knight, and the other one with the king, which happened in the game. So this isn't really enough counterplay. And yeah, black is still fighting on. He's trying to play king b2 to not allow king c1. But I guess it wouldn't really matter anymore, as here We can even give a check and put a knight on c1, the worst case, for example, like this. Here, maybe give a check. The king can go here, I guess. And of course, this is kind of close as an illustrative example, but I guess this works. There are definitely better ways to win. And yeah, this eventually worked out. White stopped the pawn. Notice it was basically down to one tempo. If it was black to move, he would win. So this was kind of too close for comfort. We should strive to win these positions more easily. And okay, here the rest of the game wasn't really very interesting. Yeah, another queen came and black eventually resigned. So interesting game, but I would say try to analyze more deeply the losses that you have. I understand they are less pleasant than wins, but they are more useful.